The gloves are off in the Republican primary in the 1st Congressional District, and neither of the two major candidates left in this race are the kind of guys who avoid a fight. We welcome today Eddie Edwards. Thanks for being here,
Morning,
Eddie.
Adam. Thanks for having me.
So you've been calling on your opponent, Senator Andy Sanborn, to sort of come clean about whatever it was that he said that it are involved in these now 2 workplace incidents back in the earlier part of this decade at the State House. Why is this important to you to draw this difference?
Well, I think it's important to the voters. I think it's important to our party. I think it's important that it's fair to Senator Sanborn to address these issues head on, clarify the issue, and move on so that they don't hound his campaign, they don't hound our primary process. They've been addressed, and let's move on from it.
So you would want him to explain exactly what it was, at least in this first instance, that he said to the Senate intern?
I think when you're a public official, you have an obligation to explain conduct that occurred while you were a public official. And that means that you go before the voters and you tell them exactly what was said, what wasn't said, what the allegations are. You explain that and you move on. That's the best way to resolve an issue. There are some people going to accept your answer, some people won't accept your answer, but at the end of the day, as a public official, you have an obligation to clear these matters up.
Mm-hmm. And in sort of responding to you, Senator Sanborn has labeled you a, quote, lifelong government bureaucrat and lobbyist. What's your response to that?
Well, you know, I'm disappointed in that comment. I mean, I find it really a little distasteful that you would describe those of us who have served in the military, those of us who have served in law enforcement, as bureaucrats. And it's said in a derogatory fashion. It's not said in a way that's supportive of those professions. And right now we have men and women serving in our great nation all over the globe, 1.3 million veterans. And to describe that service as a bureaucrat is inappropriate. You see law enforcement officers attacked daily. They're accused of being everything from Nazis to trigger-happy people to people who are racist and bigots and everything else. And they're beat up on every single day. And to have a person who seeks to office of Congress to label law enforcement members and veterans as that is a lifelong service in bureaucracy, I think it's disappointing. I think it's disappointing, and it reflects your true colors. It reflects who you are, and this is why our veterans suffer so much in our country as well as law enforcement, because it's easy to say, I support veterans, I'm there for veterans, and then take a swipe at service, right? It's easy to say, I support law enforcement, and then take a swipe at service and law enforcement.
You have 2 young adult daughters. What would you tell them if they said, well, we're going to work at the State House alongside Senator Sanborn?
As a father, I'm deeply concerned about my daughters being in situations where they could be victimized. And I think any father, any mother, any parent would be concerned about that. But also citizens are concerned about that. And I don't know the true nature of what Senator Sanborn has done, but I know he has a responsibility. Let me give you a better example of that. Right now, I think it's, close to 80 elected officials who currently serve in Congress. Who
are veterans, you mean?
No. There's less than 18% of Congress who has prior military service.
Okay.
What I'm speaking about is a couple, maybe a little less than 6 or 7 months ago, we learned that there was a number of Congress individuals who were accused of sexual harassment or racial harassment, those type of things, and we settled those suits on their behalf. Right now, we can't determine the names of those folks. This is the type of lack of transparency, lack of courage that's in Congress right now. And to me, whether it's we're talking about employees in the State House, whether we're talking about interns, I think people deserve better than that. I certainly know that the Republican Party has better candidates to offer than that.
So Bruce Cocheteer, one of the other Republican candidates, a quote-unquote establishment Republican candidate in this race, has dropped out. How does that change the dynamics in this race, do you think?
Well, first of all, I want to thank Bruce for his commitment to run for office. I think it's a big step. It requires a lot of courage to go before voters and tell them about yourself and tell them why you're running. And so Bruce is a good man. I got to know Bruce on the campaign trail. Bruce actually forced me to re-examine my approach to this campaign when he was in. Bruce is a family guy. He's a guy who gave to the community and coaching. I share that in common with him. I was a high school football coach. So I appreciated Bruce being in the race, and Bruce dropping out of the race now doesn't change my focus. My focus has always been about telling people who I am and why I'm running and why I think it's important that we elect people with character. Now that doesn't mean that I won't stand up for myself in this race and do what's right. And that's what I've always taken a great degree of pride in. It's being able to stand up and do the right things. They're not easy, but the right thing is always there, and you have to have the courage to do it.
Obviously, conservative issues are going to decide a Republican primary. Let's talk a little bit about gun policy. Should Republicans be willing to compromise at all with Democrats on any legislation that we see coming forward in terms of gun control?
You know, Adam, I think when we look at this, we have to call it what it is. We're not really talking about gun control. We're talking about people control. We're interested in controlling people. And from what I understand about the history of our nation, the history of controls, I know that there have been those in our society who have used these policies to control populations of people. And when it comes to gun control, I'm not sure why anyone who's running for federal office here in the state of New Hampshire would go to Washington and advocate for federal policy to be involved. New Hampshire has reasonable gun laws. We respect the right of individuals in our state to speak and say what they like and have the right to defend that. That's part of our Constitution, it's part of our culture. So you're not going to find me in Washington trying to compromise the values and principles of the granite state that are inconsistent with the foundation of our country. Now, if there are those who think that the best course of action is to go to Washington and have a federal law that robs New Hampshire of its pride, its traditions, and holding our citizens accountable, then that's a mistake, I believe. The regrettable actions that you've seen around the country are horrifying. They're not occurring here because we have a level of responsibility in our state. We have a culture in our state that believes in freedom and liberty. And I think when people are given maximum freedom and liberty, they will do what's in their interest, in their family's interest, in their community's interest. Having someone control that process, I find it very inconsistent with the nature of our country and certainly the principles of New Hampshire.
The effort to repeal and replace Obamacare fell short in Congress. What would you be doing on the issue of health care if you were elected?
Well, the first thing I would be doing is, again, giving people freedom of choice. Right now, you don't have freedom of choice. If you take good care of yourself, you exercise, you eat right, I can tell that, and you should be able to shop wherever you like to get the best price that you want. You should know the price of what it's going to cost you. We hide the cost of medical care. We limit your access to shop around, to engage in a free market. Those are the type of things that have hurt our healthcare system. And I think those are the things I would be working on doing. What you won't find me doing is making promises to you, your family, and other citizens in our state, and lacking the courage to do so. Because one of the things I think is most offensive is that we pay 73% of Congress members health care. I think that's wrong. You know, having a military background, law enforcement background, you don't take care of yourself before you take care of your troops. And so right now we have elected officials who are willing to take care of themselves, put themselves in a better position to make sure their families are taken care of, while you and I and our families experience a higher increase in health care costs, limited access. That's not right. If they were really serious about that, they would address it. Whether that's a Republican or a Democrat, they would address it.
Obviously, Russia dominated the headlines this last week. The president is indicating he'd like to have Vladimir Putin come to Washington later this year. Is that a good idea to bring someone, an adversary, who we believe, this country believes, the government at least believes, that he attacked this election in 2016? Is it wise to bring him to Washington, D.C., to the Oval Office?
I think it's fair to say that what's happened in the past has not worked, right? The thought leaders, the so-called subject matter experts in this area, their policies have been in place for a number of years, and it's failed to build the type of relationships that are necessary to reduce our responsibilities in the world. Right now, we have over 800 military installations around the globe in 70 countries. You have a president who's trying to do things a little differently to improve those relationships. I don't think there's any harm in trying to improve relationships. Clearly, Russia has never been a friend of America. Putin is no friend to America. But that doesn't mean that you don't try to improve those relationships so that it costs less for us to be involved. And I think the president should be given some level of support. Here you have a person who was elected because the vast majority of people in this country believed in him. They want a different approach. They wanted a different approach in how we govern. They wanted a different approach in our foreign affairs. I think he was criticized heavily for his approach to dealing with North Korea. And we don't know what the outcome, that final outcome will be, but we know he took a different approach, a different stance. And I think that should be, at some level, appreciated. To keep the continual pace and do the things we've always done, I think is a little disingenuous.
All right, candidate Eddie Edwards, we appreciate your time here today.
Thank you, Adam.
All right.